Maya clutched her worn backpack tighter as she stood outside the grand mansion that had never truly felt like home. The 16-year-old girl watched through the window as her stepmother Victoria counted money with greedy fingers. 3 years had passed since Maya's father died in that terrible car accident, and every day since then had been a struggle for survival. Victoria had made it clear from the beginning that Maya was nothing more than a burden. The woman had married Maya's father for his money, but when he died she discovered that most of his wealth was tied up in investments that wouldn't mature for years. The house, the cars, even the furniture, everything was heavily mortgaged. Victoria found herself drowning in debt with a teenage stepdaughter to feed and clothe. "Maya, get in here right now." Victoria's shrill voice cut through the morning air. Maya reluctantly entered the living room where Victoria sat surrounded by bills and collection notices. The woman's bleached blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her heavily made-up face showed nothing but irritation. "I've had enough of this," Victoria announced, waving a stack of overdue bills. "Do you see this? The mortgage is 3 months behind. The credit cards are maxed out, and you just sit there eating my food and taking up space." Maya kept her eyes down. She had learned not to argue with Victoria. The woman had a vicious temper and wasn't afraid to use her hands when angry. Maya's arms still bore faint bruises from their last confrontation. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered. "I can get a job after school. I can help." "Help?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "You're 16 years old. What kind of job could you possibly get that would make a difference?" "No, I've found a better solution." Maya's blood ran cold. She had heard Victoria on the phone the night before, speaking in hushed tones about getting rid of the problem and making some quick money. Maya had hoped she was just being paranoid, but the look in Victoria's eyes told her otherwise. "There's a man coming here today?" Victoria continued, standing up and pacing around the room. "His name is Daniel. He's agreed to take you off my hands." "What do you mean?" Maya's voice was barely audible. "I mean, he's going to marry you, and I'm going, to get enough money to pay off these bills and start fresh somewhere else." Victoria's smile was cold and calculating. "He's not much to look at, and he's older than I'd prefer, but he's willing to pay good money for a young, pretty wife." Maya felt the world spinning around her. "You can't do this. I'm still a minor. This is illegal." "Illegal?" Victoria laughed harshly. "Who's going to stop me? You have no other family, no friends who would miss you. Your father is dead, and I'm your legal guardian. I can do whatever I want with you." The doorbell rang, and Victoria's expression brightened. "That must be him now. Remember, Maya, you'll smile and be polite. If you cause any trouble, you'll regret it." Maya watched in horror as Victoria opened the door to reveal a man who looked like he hadn't bathed in weeks. His clothes were dirty and torn, his hair was greasy and unkempt, and the smell that wafted from him made Maya's stomach turn. He appeared to be in his 40s, with yellowed teeth and bloodshot eyes that looked Maya up and down like she was merchandise. "You must be Daniel," Victoria said sweetly, as if she were welcoming a respected guest instead of a man who looked like he lived on the streets. "That's right," Daniel replied, his voice rough and gravelly. "And this must be the girl." He stepped closer to Maya, who instinctively backed away. "She's prettier than you described. This might work out just fine." Victoria beamed. "Maya, say hello to your future husband." Maya wanted to scream. She wanted to run, but where could she go? She had no money, no friends, no family who cared about her. Victoria had systematically isolated her from everyone over the past 3 years, convincing Maya that she was worthless and unwanted. "How much?" Daniel asked bluntly. "We discussed 10,000, Victoria replied. 5,000 now. 5,000 after the ceremony." Daniel reached into his dirty jacket and pulled out a wad of crumpled bills. Maya couldn't believe what she was seeing. This homeless-looking man was carrying around thousands of dollars in cash. "Here's your down payment," Daniel said, handing Victoria the money. "I'll be back tomorrow to collect her. Have her ready." After Daniel left, Maya tried one last time to reason with her stepmother. "Please, Victoria, I'll do anything. I'll drop out of school and work full-time. I'll clean houses, wait tables, whatever it takes. Just don't do this to me." Victoria was busy counting the money and barely looked up. "It's too late, Maya. The deal is done. Besides, what kind of life would you have here anyway? At least with Daniel, you'll have a purpose." That night, Maya lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. She had considered running away, but where would she go? She had no money and winter was approaching. The thought of living on the streets terrified her almost as much as the thought of marrying Daniel. She thought about her father and how disappointed he would be if he knew what Victoria was doing. He had always told Maya that she was strong and capable of anything. But right now, she felt anything but strong. She felt trapped and helpless, like a bird in a cage with no hope of escape. As dawn approached, Maya heard Victoria moving around downstairs, probably preparing for Daniel's return. Maya knew that in just a few hours, her life as she knew it would be over. She would become the property of a man she didn't know, didn't love, and frankly, didn't trust. But something deep inside Maya refused to give up completely. Her father had taught her to be observant, and she had noticed something strange about Daniel. Despite his homeless appearance, he carried a lot of cash and seemed surprisingly confident for someone living on the streets. There was something about him that didn't quite add up, though Maya couldn't put her finger on what it was. Whatever was about to happen, Maya promised herself that she would stay alert and look for any opportunity to improve her situation. She might be powerless now, but she wouldn't stay that way forever. The next morning arrived too quickly for Maya's liking. She had barely slept, spending most of the night staring out her bedroom window and wondering if she would ever see this room again. Victoria had been up since dawn, cleaning the house and preparing Maya like she was getting ready for a normal wedding instead of selling her to a stranger. "Put this on," Victoria commanded, throwing a simple white dress onto Maya's bed. "And do something with your hair. I want you to look presentable." Maya held up the dress. It was cheap and clearly bought from a discount store, but it was white and resembled a wedding dress enough to make the whole situation feel more real and more terrifying. Her hands shook as she put it on. "I can't believe you're really doing this," Maya said quietly as Victoria applied makeup to her face with rough, impatient strokes. "Life isn't a fairy tale, Maya," Victoria replied coldly. "Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to survive. You should be grateful that someone is willing to take care of you." "Take care of me?" He looks like he can barely take care of himself. Victoria grabbed Maya's chin roughly. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. That man is your ticket out of here, and my ticket to a better life. You'll marry him, and you'll make the best of it. Do I make myself clear?" Before Maya could answer, the doorbell rang again. Victoria's face lit up with fake cheerfulness as she went to answer it. Maya heard Daniel's gruff voice and felt her stomach drop. When she came downstairs, Daniel was standing in the living room wearing what appeared to be the same dirty clothes from the day before. He had made some attempt to clean himself up. His hair was slightly less greasy and he smelled less offensive. But he still looked like someone who had been living rough for months. "There she is," Daniel said, looking Maya up and down appreciatively. "You clean up nice, girl." Maya forced herself to look at him directly for the first time. Despite his disheveled appearance, she noticed that his eyes were sharp and intelligent. There was something calculating about the way he observed everything around him, as if he were taking mental notes. "I've got a preacher waiting outside," Daniel announced. "We can do this quick and simple." Victoria clapped her hands together excitedly. "How wonderful! Maya, isn't this exciting?" Maya wanted to vomit. Through the window, she could see an elderly man in a dark suit standing next to what appeared to be Daniel's car. Except it wasn't the beat-up vehicle she had expected. Instead, it was a modest but well-maintained sedan that looked surprisingly clean and reliable. "Shall we get this done?" Daniel asked, extending his arm toward Maya. Maya had no choice but to take it. His arm felt surprisingly solid and strong beneath his torn jacket. As they walked toward the door, Maya noticed something else odd. Despite his homeless appearance, Daniel moved with confidence and purpose. He wasn't shuffling or stumbling like someone who had been living on the streets. His posture was straight, and his steps were sure. The ceremony itself was a blur. Maya stood in Victoria's living room, barely listening as the preacher read from a small book. She said, "I do," when prompted, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. Daniel's voice was steady and clear when he spoke his vows, and Maya noticed that his grammar and vocabulary seemed more educated than his appearance suggested. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Victoria practically bounced with excitement. "Congratulations, Maya, you're married." Daniel handed Victoria the remaining $5,000 without ceremony. Victoria counted it eagerly, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Well, that's that," Victoria said, tucking the money into her purse. "Maya, get your things. You're going with your husband now." The reality of the situation hit Maya like a physical blow. She was actually leaving with this stranger. She was married to him. Legally, she belonged to him now. Maya gathered her few possessions, some clothes, a few books, and a photo of her father, and stuffed them into her old backpack. Victoria didn't even say goodbye. She was already on the phone with someone, probably making plans for how to spend her money. "Come on," Daniel said gruffly. "Let's go." Maya followed him to the car, expecting the worst, but when Daniel opened the passenger door for her, she was surprised by the gesture. The inside of the car was clean and comfortable, with leather seats and a functioning air conditioning system. As they drove through the city, Maya tried to figure out where they were going. Daniel hadn't said a word since they left Victoria's house, and Maya was afraid to ask questions. But she couldn't help noticing that they seemed to be driving through increasingly rough neighborhoods. "Where are we going?" Maya finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Home," Daniel replied simply. They pulled up in front of what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse in the industrial part of town. Maya's heart sank. This was even worse than she had imagined. Daniel was going to make her live in some horrible empty building without heat or running water. But when Daniel led her inside, Maya was shocked by what she found. The warehouse had been converted into a surprisingly comfortable living space. There was a small but clean apartment with a bed, a kitchenette, and even a bathroom. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm and dry and infinitely better than living on the street. "This is where you'll stay," Daniel said, setting her backpack down near the bed. "What about you?" Maya asked. Daniel looked at her with something that might have been amusement. "Don't worry about me, I have my own arrangements." Maya looked around the space more carefully. Despite its warehouse location, everything was clean and functional. There was food in the small refrigerator and clean sheets on the bed. Someone had clearly prepared this place for her arrival. "Why are you doing this?" Maya asked suddenly. "Why did you pay Victoria all that money for me? What do you want?" Daniel studied her for a long moment before answering. "Let's just say I believe in helping people who need help." "But marriage? Why marriage?" "Marriage was the only legal way to get you away from that woman," Daniel replied. "Don't worry. This isn't a real marriage in any sense that matters. You're safe here." Maya didn't know what to believe. Nothing about this situation made sense. Daniel looked homeless but had thousands of dollars in cash. He acted uneducated but spoke with intelligence. He lived in a warehouse but had provided her with a comfortable place to stay. "I don't understand any of this," Maya said. Daniel moved toward the door. "You don't need to understand everything right now. Just know that you're safe, you're fed, and you're away from Victoria. That's what matters." "Wait," Maya called as he reached the door. "Will I see you again?" Daniel paused. "Eventually. For now, just rest and try to adjust. There's food in the kitchen and books on the shelf. I'll check on you in a few days." After he left, Maya sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she had been living with her abusive stepmother. Now she was married to a mysterious stranger and living in a converted warehouse. 3 days passed before Maya saw Daniel again. During that time, she had explored every inch of her new living space and tried to make sense of her situation. The warehouse apartment was more comfortable than she had initially realized. The bed was actually quite nice. The small kitchen was fully stocked with quality food, and there was even a selection of books that suggested someone had put thought into what might interest a teenage girl. Maya had always been a curious person, and the mystery surrounding Daniel consumed her thoughts. She had found a few clues that made her even more confused. Hidden behind some books, she discovered a business magazine with an article about successful entrepreneurs. On the small desk there was a notebook with what appeared to be complex financial calculations written in neat handwriting. Most puzzling of all, she had noticed expensive-looking items scattered throughout the space. A watch that looked like it cost more than Victoria's car, and a phone that was definitely the latest model. When Daniel finally returned, Maya was ready with questions. He entered quietly, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing the same ragged clothes as before. "How are you settling in?" he asked, setting the groceries on the small kitchen counter. "I'm fine, but I need to know what's really going on here," Maya said firmly. She had spent 3 days building up courage for this conversation. "Nothing about you makes sense." Daniel looked at her, with what might have been respect. "What do you mean?" Maya pointed to the expensive items she had discovered. "You dress like you're homeless, but you have things that cost thousands of dollars. You paid Victoria $10,000 in cash like it was nothing. You live in a warehouse, but you speak like you went to college. Who are you really?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, studying Maya's face. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was the first genuine smile Maya had seen from him, and it completely transformed his appearance. "You're observant," he said. "That's good. That will serve you well in life." "Are you going to answer my question?" Daniel sat down on the single chair in the room. "What I'm about to tell you has to stay between us. Can you promise me that?" Maya nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. "My name is Daniel Morrison," he began, "and I own Morrison Industries." Maya's jaw dropped. Even at 16, she knew that name. Morrison Industries was one of the largest companies in the state, with businesses ranging from real estate to technology. The owner was rumored to be worth billions. "That's impossible," Maya whispered. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He handed Maya a driver's license and several credit cards, all bearing the name Daniel Morrison. There was also a business card identifying him as the CEO of Morrison Industries. "But why do you look like—" Maya gestured at his appearance. "Like a homeless man?" Daniel finished. "Because sometimes the best way to see the real world is to experience it from the bottom. For the past 6 months, I've been living on the streets, in shelters, anywhere that people at the bottom of society end up. I wanted to understand what life is really like for people who have nothing." Maya stared at him in amazement. "You gave up your comfortable life to live like a homeless person?" "Not gave up, temporarily set aside. I still run my company, but I do it quietly. I have people who handle the day-to-day operations while I conduct this experiment." "But why did you buy me from Victoria? What does that have to do with your experiment?" Daniel's expression darkened. "During my time on the streets, I've seen horrible things. I've met people who prey on the vulnerable, who take advantage of those who have no power to fight back. When I heard about your situation through certain channels, I knew I had to help." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. "You saved me. You saved yourself," Daniel corrected. "I just provided an opportunity. But Maya, I need you to understand something important. This arrangement we have, it's temporary. I couldn't legally remove you from Victoria's custody without marrying you, but this isn't a real marriage in any meaningful way. You're 16 years old. You should be in school thinking about your future, not trapped in a marriage with a stranger. What happens to me when your experiment is over?" Daniel leaned forward. "That depends on what you want. I can arrange for you to finish school, even help you get into college. I can make sure you have enough money to start your own life. Or if you prefer, I can help you find a loving family who would be happy to adopt you." Maya felt overwhelmed by the possibilities. For 3 years she had lived day by day just trying to survive Victoria's abuse. The idea of having choices, having a future, was almost too much to comprehend. "Why would you do all that for me? You don't even know me." "Because everyone deserves a chance at happiness," Daniel said simply. "And because I see something in you, intelligence, strength, resilience. You survived 3 years with Victoria. You asked the right questions to figure out that I wasn't who I appeared to be. Those qualities will take you far in life if you get the right opportunities." Maya wiped tears from her eyes. "How long do we have to stay married?" "Until you turn 18. Then we can quietly get divorced and you'll be free to make your own choices about your life. In the meantime, you'll live here, you'll go to school, and you'll be safe. Can I ask you something? Maya said after a moment. Of course. Why? Are you really doing this experiment? Living on the streets, I mean. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Because I inherited my wealth, he finally said. I never had to struggle for anything. I never had to wonder where my next meal was coming from or whether I'd have a place to sleep. I wanted to understand what life is like for people who don't have those advantages. I wanted to see if there were ways my company could help make a real difference. And what have you learned? That the world is full of people like Victoria who prey on the vulnerable, but it's also full of people who would help if they knew how. I've met homeless individuals who shared their last dollar with someone hungrier than they were. I've seen communities come together to protect their most vulnerable members. Daniel stood up and walked to the small window that looked out over the industrial district. I've also learned that sometimes the best way to help someone is to give them choices they never had before. Maya felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years, the feeling of hope. For the first time since her father's death, she felt like her life might actually get better. What happens now? She asked. Now you finish high school. I'll arrange for a tutor to help you catch up on anything you missed while dealing with Victoria. You'll take college prep courses, and you'll start thinking about what kind of life you want to build for yourself. Daniel headed toward the door, then paused. Maya, there's something else you should know. What Victoria did to you. Selling. You like property. It was wrong on every level, but you survived it. You're stronger than you know. After he left, Maya sat in her small apartment and marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few days. She was married to a billionaire who was pretending to be homeless, living in a warehouse, and suddenly had more opportunities than she had ever dreamed possible. It was overwhelming and confusing and wonderful all at once. But for the first time in 3 years, Maya smiled with genuine happiness. 2 months had passed since Maya's strange marriage to Daniel, and her life had settled into a routine she never could have imagined. Every morning, a tutor named Mrs. Chen arrived to help Maya catch up on her education. Mrs. Chen was a kind, patient woman who never asked questions about Maya's unusual living situation, but clearly understood that Maya needed extra support. Daniel visited every few days, always maintaining his homeless appearance whenever he came to the warehouse. But Maya had started to notice small changes in him. He seemed more confident, more purposeful, as if his time on the streets had taught him things he couldn't have learned any other way. How's the studying going? Daniel asked during one of his visits, sitting across from Maya at the small table where she did her homework. Good, Maya replied, closing her mathematics textbook. Mrs. Chen says I'm catching up faster than she expected. I should be ready for the high school equivalency exam in a few months. Daniel nodded approvingly. And what about after that? Have you thought about what you want to do next? Maya had thought about it constantly. For the first time in her life, she had choices, and the abundance of options was both exciting and terrifying. I think I want to go to college. Maybe study, business, or social work. I want to help people who are in situations like I was. That's admirable, Daniel said, but you don't have to limit yourself to helping people as a career. There are many ways to make a difference in the world. Maya looked at him curiously. Is that what you're doing with your experiment? Trying to figure out how to make a difference? Daniel's expression became serious. In part, but I'm also learning things about myself that I never knew. Living without the safety net of wealth has shown me how different life can be when you don't have options. What do you mean? Daniel stood up and walked to the small window. When I was living in shelters, I met a man named Charlie. He had worked construction his whole life until he hurt his back and couldn't work anymore. He lost his apartment, then his truck, then everything else. He ended up on the streets through no fault of his own. Maya listened intently as Daniel continued. Charlie was trying to get disability benefits, but the process was complicated and he couldn't afford a lawyer. He needed help filling out forms, understanding legal language, navigating a system that seemed designed to keep people like him from getting help. What happened to him? I helped him get the assistance he needed. But not as Daniel Morrison, the billionaire. I helped him as Daniel, the homeless guy who happened to know how to work the system. It made me realize that sometimes the best way to help isn't to throw money at a problem, but to get in there and work alongside people who are struggling. Maya felt a surge of admiration for Daniel. You could have just written him a check. I could have, Daniel agreed. But that wouldn't have taught me anything, and it wouldn't have addressed the real problem. Charlie wasn't just one person who needed money. He was representative of thousands of people who fall through the cracks in our system. Over the following weeks, Maya began to understand more about Daniel's mission. He would disappear for days at a time, living rough and working with people who had nowhere else to turn. But he would always return with stories about the people he had met and the problems he was trying to solve. One evening, Daniel arrived looking more disheveled than usual. There was a cut on his forehead and his clothes were dirtier than normal. What happened to you? Maya asked, alarmed. Daniel sat down heavily. I was trying to help a group of homeless veterans who were being harassed by some gang members. Things got a little rough. Maya felt a stab of worry. Daniel, this is getting dangerous. Why don't you just use your real identity? You could hire security or work through your company to help these people. Because that's not how real change happens, Daniel said firmly. Rich people have been throwing money at problems for decades, and the problems persist. Real change happens when you understand the issues from the inside out. But Maya could see that the constant danger and stress were taking a toll on Daniel. He looked tired and worn down in a way that had nothing to do with his disguise. What if something happens to you? Maya asked. What happens to me then? Daniel looked at her sharply. Is that what you're worried about? What happens to you? Maya felt her cheeks burn. No, that's not. I mean, yes, I worry about that, but I also worry about you. You're taking unnecessary risks, and for what? To prove some point? It's not about proving a point, Daniel said, his voice rising. It's about understanding how the world really works for people who don't have advantages. But you do have advantages, Maya shot back. You have billions of dollars. You could help people more effectively by using those advantages instead of pretending they don't exist. Daniel stared at her for a moment, then laughed. You know, you're starting to sound like my board of directors. Maybe they have a point. Daniel sat back in his chair, looking thoughtful. Tell me something, Maya. What's the most important thing I've done for you? Maya considered the question. You got me away from Victoria. How did I do that? You married me. Why did I marry you instead of just paying Victoria to leave you alone or calling social services or using my connections to have you removed from her custody? Maya thought about it, because those other options might not have worked, or they might have put me in foster care, or Victoria might have just taken the money and sold me to someone else. Exactly, Daniel said. Sometimes the most effective solution isn't the most obvious one. Sometimes you have to work within the system as it exists, not as you wish it existed. Maya began to understand. That's what you're doing with your homeless experiment. You're learning to work within the system from the bottom up. Now, you're getting it. But Maya still had concerns. That doesn't mean you have to put yourself in danger. There has to be a smarter way to do this. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he finally admitted. I've been so focused on experiencing poverty firsthand that I may have lost sight of the bigger picture. The goal isn't to live like a homeless person forever, is to understand their experiences well enough to create real solutions. So what does that mean? It means maybe it's time to start transitioning back to my real life. I've learned what I needed to learn. Now I need to figure out how to put that knowledge to work. Maya felt a mix of relief and anxiety. If Daniel returned to his normal life, what would that mean for their unusual arrangement? Where would she fit in the life of a billionaire? What about us? Maya asked quietly. Daniel looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That's up to you, Maya. In about a year, you'll turn 18 and you'll be free to make your own choices about your life. You can go to college, start a career, travel the world, whatever you want. But what if I don't know what I want? Then you'll figure it out, Daniel said. That's what growing up is about. Figuring out who you are and what matters to you. As Daniel prepared to leave, Maya realized that their strange arrangement was beginning to change. Daniel was starting to return to his real life, and soon she would have to figure out her place in the world. It was exciting and terrifying at the same time. But for the first time, Maya felt truly ready for whatever came next. 6 months later, Maya barely recognized the man who walked through her door. Daniel had gradually been transitioning back to his normal life, and today he looked nothing like the homeless man who had married her almost a year ago. His hair was professionally cut, his face was clean-shaven, and he wore an expensive suit that fit him perfectly. But it was more than his appearance that had changed. There was a new energy about him, a sense of purpose that seemed to radiate from every move he made. "Maya," he said, his voice warm with genuine affection. "Are you ready for a field trip?" Maya looked up from her college preparation books. Over the past few months, she had grown from a frightened 16-year-old into a confident young woman. Mrs. Chen had helped her not only catch up on her education, but excel beyond what anyone had expected. Maya had scored in the top 10% on her high school equivalency exam and had already been accepted to 3 different universities. "What kind of field trip?" Maya asked, closing her books. "I want to show you something I've been working on, something that grew out of my time on the streets." Maya had noticed that Daniel's visits had become less frequent as he returned to running his company, but when he did come, he was always excited about new projects and initiatives. She had started to realize that Daniel's homeless experiment hadn't just changed his perspective, it had fundamentally transformed his approach to business and philanthropy. They drove through the city in Daniel's car, but instead of heading toward the business district where Morrison Industries was headquartered, they went toward the part of town where Maya had first lived with Daniel. But when they stopped, Maya was amazed by what she saw. Where there had once been abandoned warehouses and empty lots, there was now a bustling community center. The building was modern and welcoming, with large windows and outdoor spaces where people were gathering and talking. A sign by the entrance read, "Morrison, Community Resource Center." "You built this?" Maya asked, staring in amazement. "We built this," Daniel corrected. "The design, the programs, the whole approach. It's all based on what I learned during my time living on the streets. But more importantly, it's based on what the people in this community told me they needed." As they walked through the center, Daniel explained how it worked. There were job training programs, legal aid services, mental health counseling, and temporary housing assistance. But what impressed Maya most was that everything was designed with dignity in mind. This wasn't a typical charity where people had to prove they were worthy of help. It was a place where people could access resources while maintaining their self-respect. "This is incredible," Maya said as they toured a computer lab where people were learning new skills. "How many people have you helped?" "In the 6 months we've been open, we've served over 2,000 people," Daniel said proudly. "But the real measure of success isn't just the numbers. It's the fact that people keep coming back to help others. We've created a community, not just a service." Maya watched as Daniel interacted with the staff and clients. It was clear that many people recognized him, not as the wealthy CEO of Morrison Industries, but as someone who had lived among them and understood their struggles. There was a level of trust and respect that Maya had never seen between wealthy donors and the people they were trying to help. "There's someone I want you to meet," Daniel said, leading Maya toward a small office in the back of the building. Inside, Maya met Charlie, the construction worker Daniel had told her about months earlier. Charlie was now working as a counselor at the center, helping other people navigate the disability benefit system that had once seemed impossible for him to understand. "This young lady is my wife Maya," Daniel said, introducing them. Maya still felt strange when Daniel referred to her as his wife. Even though they had been legally married for almost a year, their relationship had evolved into something between friendship and family, but it certainly wasn't a traditional marriage. "Maya," Charlie said, shaking her hand warmly. "Daniel's told me so much about you. You're the smart one who figured out he wasn't really homeless, right?" Maya laughed. It took me a while, but yes, eventually I put the pieces together. Well, I'm glad you did, Charlie continued. This man was so busy trying to save everyone else, he was starting to put himself in real danger. He needed someone to remind him that he could do more good with his head attached to his shoulders. As they continued touring the center, Maya began to understand something important about Daniel's transformation. He hadn't just learned about poverty during his time on the streets. He had learned how to bridge the gap between wealth and need in a way that actually worked. Daniel, Maya said as they sat in the center's cafe sharing lunch with several of the program participants. I have a confession to make. What's that? When you first told me you were a billionaire, I thought you were crazy for giving up your comfortable life to live on the streets. But now I understand what you accomplished. You didn't just learn about homelessness, you learned how to solve it. Daniel smiled. I learned how to start solving it. There's still so much work to do. Maya looked around at the bustling center. What's next for you? Are you going to open more centers like this? Actually, I was hoping you might help me answer that question. Maya was surprised. Me? How? Daniel pulled out a folder and handed it to her. Inside were architectural plans, budget projections, and demographic studies for potential community centers in 5 different cities. I want to expand this program, Daniel explained. But I don't want to make the same mistakes that other well-intentioned wealthy people have made. I need someone who understands what it's like to be powerless, someone who can help me make sure we're actually serving the people we're trying to help. Maya stared at the documents. You want me to help you run your charity? I want you to help me run something bigger than charity. I want to create a new model for how wealth can be used to create real lasting change, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have as a partner in that effort. Maya felt overwhelmed. But I'm only 17. I don't have experience with business or nonprofits or anything like that. You have something more valuable than experience, Daniel said. You have perspective. You know what it's like to be at the mercy of people who have power over you. You understand what dignity means when you've had it taken away. Maya looked around the community center again, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't just about helping homeless people. It was about creating a new way for society to address inequality and injustice. What about college? Maya asked. I've been accepted to several schools. College will always be there, Daniel said. But opportunities like this, chances to create something completely new, they don't come along very often. Maya thought about Victoria, about the months she had spent feeling powerless and trapped. She thought about all the people she had met through Daniel's work who had been in similar situations, and she thought about the possibility of being part of something that could prevent others from experiencing what she had gone through. If I do this, Maya said slowly, I want to do it right. I want to go to school part-time and study nonprofit management and social work. I want to understand not just what needs to be done, but how to do it effectively. Daniel's face lit up. That sounds perfect. And I want to start by spending time in each of these cities not as your partner, but as someone who needs help. I want to understand what services already exist and where the gaps are. Daniel looked at her with something that might have been pride. You want to do your own version of my homeless experiment? Not exactly, Maya said. I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not, but I want to understand each community from the ground up before we try to change it. Over the next several hours, Daniel and Maya discussed the details of their potential partnership. Maya would finish her high school education and start college classes part-time. She would work with Daniel to research and develop new community centers, and most importantly, she would help ensure that their efforts were actually effective, not just well-intentioned. As the day ended and they prepared to leave the community center, Maya realized how much her life had changed since that terrible day when Victoria had sold her to a stranger. She had gone from being powerless to being offered a chance to help others gain power over their own lives. Daniel, Maya said as they walked to the car, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret marrying me? I mean, it must have complicated your life in ways you didn't expect. Daniel stopped walking and looked at her seriously. Maya, marrying you was the best decision I've made in years. Not because of any romantic feelings, we both know this isn't that kind of marriage, but because you've made me a better person and a more effective leader. How? You've kept me grounded. You've challenged my ideas. You've reminded me that the goal isn't to feel good about helping people, it's to actually help them. And now you're offering to help me do that on a much larger scale. Maya felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with purpose. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had found her calling. So what happens to us? Maya asked. I mean, to our marriage? Daniel smiled. What happens to us is that we become the best business partners the world has ever seen. And in about 6 months, when you turn 18, we'll quietly get divorced and become the best business partners the world has ever seen. Maya laughed. That sounds perfect. As they drove back toward her warehouse apartment, Maya looked out at the city and saw it differently than she ever had before. Instead of seeing problems without solutions, she saw opportunities to make real change. And instead of feeling powerless, she felt ready to take on the world. 1 year later, Maya stood in the ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, surrounded by business leaders, politicians, and philanthropists. She was 18 now, poised and confident in a way that would have been impossible to imagine 2 years earlier. Tonight was the launch event for the Morrison Foundation's 5th Community Center, and Maya was about to give the keynote speech. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now comfortable in the same social circles that had once seemed impossibly distant. But she hadn't forgotten where she came from, and she made sure that her work stayed grounded in the reality she had lived. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies announced, please welcome the Executive Director of the Morrison Foundation, Maya Morrison. Maya had legally changed her last name after her divorce from Daniel 6 months earlier. It had been a practical decision. They were business partners now, and sharing a name made certain aspects of their work easier. But it also felt right. Daniel had given her more than just an escape from Victoria. He had given her a family and a purpose. As Maya approached the podium, she spotted Daniel in the audience. He was sitting with Charlie and several other people from their first community center, all of whom had become important voices in the foundation's work. Daniel caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod. 2 years ago, Maya began, her voice clear and strong, I was sold like a piece of property to a man I had never met. Tonight I stand before you as the leader of an organization that has helped over 15,000 people rebuild their lives with dignity and hope. A murmur went through the audience. Maya had learned that sharing her story, uncomfortable as it sometimes was, helped people understand why the foundation's work mattered on a personal level. The man who bought me, Maya continued, was Daniel Morrison, but he didn't buy me to own me. He bought me to free me, and in the process he learned something that has revolutionized how we think about addressing poverty and inequality. Maya went on to explain how Daniel's homeless experiment had led to insights that traditional charity work had missed. She talked about the importance of dignity, community involvement, and long-term solutions rather than quick fixes. Our community centers don't just provide services, Maya explained. They create ecosystems where people can rebuild not just their circumstances, but their sense of agency and self-worth. We don't rescue people, we give them tools to rescue themselves. As Maya described the foundation's work, she shared statistics that demonstrated their success. Their job placement rate was over 80%. Their housing stability program had a 90% success rate. Most importantly, over 60% of their program participants eventually became volunteers, creating a self-sustaining community of support. But Maya knew that numbers only told part of the story. The real success was in the individual lives that had been transformed. I'd like to introduce you to someone, Maya said, gesturing toward the audience. Mrs. Rodriguez, would you please stand? An elderly woman in the front row stood up, beaming with pride. Maya had met her 6 months earlier when Mrs. Rodriguez had come to their newest center after losing her apartment due to medical bills. Mrs. Rodriguez came to us facing homelessness for the first time in her 73 years, Maya explained. She was proud, scared, and convinced that accepting help would mean giving up her independence. Today, she not only has stable housing, but she runs our senior services program and has helped over 200 other seniors navigate similar challenges. The audience applauded as Mrs. Rodriguez waved shyly. Maya felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came from seeing someone reclaim their power and use it to help others. The traditional model of charity creates dependence, Maya continued. Our model creates leaders. We don't just solve problems, we create problem solvers. After her speech, Maya mingled with the guests, many of whom were potential donors or partners. She had become skilled at these events, able to speak the language of business while never losing sight of the human impact of their work. Impressive speech, said a woman Maya recognized as the mayor. I have to ask, though, isn't it unusual for someone so young to be running such a large foundation? Maya smiled. Age is just one factor in leadership. Experience, perspective, and commitment matter more. I may be young, but I bring a perspective that most foundation leaders don't have. I've been on the receiving end of the system we're trying to change. Later that evening, after the last guest had left, Maya and Daniel sat in the hotel's quiet bar reflecting on how far they had come. Do you ever miss it? Maya asked. Your old life, I mean. Before the homeless experiment. Before all this complexity? Daniel considered the question. I miss the simplicity sometimes, but I don't miss the ignorance. I used to think that having money automatically made me qualified to solve problems. Now I know that understanding problems is much harder and much more important than just throwing money at them. Maya nodded. I've been thinking about Victoria lately. Oh? Why? Maya swirled the ice in her drink. I found out that she spent all the money you paid her within 6 months. She's working as a waitress now, living paycheck to paycheck. How do you feel about that? Maya thought for a moment. I feel sorry for her, actually. She had $10,000 and could have used it to build a better life for herself. Instead, she spent it on things that didn't matter. She's still trapped by her own poor choices. Have you thought about reaching out to her? I have, but I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Maybe someday. But right now I want to focus on helping people who actually want to be helped. Daniel raised his glass. To helping people who want to be helped. Maya clinked her glass against his. And to the strangest business partnership in history, as they sat in comfortable silence, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been a powerless teenager with no options and no hope. Now she was the leader of a foundation that was changing lives across multiple cities with plans to expand nationally within the next 5 years. But more than that, she had found her purpose. Every day she worked with people who reminded her of her younger self, people who had been written off by society but who possessed incredible strength and potential. Her job was to help them see that potential in themselves and give them the tools to act on it. Maya, Daniel said, breaking the silence. I have something to tell you. Maya looked at him curiously. What's that? The board of directors wants to expand the foundation internationally. They want to pilot programs in 3 countries over the next 2 years. Maya felt her heart race with excitement. That's incredible. Which countries? That's up to you to decide. You're the executive director. The board trusts your judgment completely. Maya was quiet for a moment, overwhelmed by the responsibility and the opportunity. I'll need to spend time in each potential country, understanding their specific challenges and resources. I figured you'd say that. Daniel smiled. You've never been one to make assumptions about what people need. As they prepared to leave the hotel, Maya realized that her strange marriage to Daniel had given her something she had never expected to have: a real family and a meaningful life's work. They might not be married anymore, but they had become something even more valuable: true partners in creating change. Walking out into the night air, Maya looked up at the stars and thought about all the people whose lives had been transformed through their work. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez and Charlie and hundreds of others who had found their own power and were using it to help others. Most importantly, she thought about the scared 16-year-old girl who had once felt like nothing more than a burden. That girl could never have imagined standing in a ballroom full of powerful people, speaking with confidence about changing the world. But she had imagined something else. She had imagined a life where she mattered, where she had choices, where she could make a difference. And against all odds, that dream had come true. Tomorrow, Maya would start planning their international expansion. She would research communities, build partnerships, and work to create more places where people could reclaim their dignity and their power. But tonight, she was simply grateful for the strange journey that had brought her from desperation to purpose, and for the unlikely partnership that had made it all possible.